Hello, can you hear me?
Hello, Daniel. How are you?
Great. How are you doing, Rishi?
I am doing fantastic. We have quite an interesting set of projects today. We're going to be doing a little more landing page feedback than usual. I think we've had a little bit of, I think over the past couple sessions that we've done, a pretty wide variety of questions. Today, actually, a lot of people just want landing page feedback.
Okay.
That'll be fun.
Uh, that sounds fun. Shall we get to it?
Let's get right to it. We actually have an interesting thing that I'm surprised we haven't seen before, which is Roman has from Russia has two landing pages, and he just wants us to pick which one's better.
Oh, that's a good concept.
Yeah, people should do that more. Actually, it's a fun one.
Should I screen share?
Go for it.
Okay.
Excellent.
So we're getting started with TimeOS. Is that right?
Yep.
Okay. And this isn't the screen share split. This isn't the double homepage split. Oh, it is. Okay, great. So this is the first one, and we're going to compare it to the second one. Is that right?
Yep. I sent you the link to the other one as well.
Yep, get 26 hours every day. TimeOS helps you build a perfect schedule in seconds. That's good. 2 extra hours. Thank you, very helpful for Jack Bauer. And this is the other homepage. Current calendars are fax machines in the 5G era. We're here to change that. We're here, comma, to change that. Right, interesting. Well, there's a lot going on in terms of differences. Obviously, there's color scheme, but I imagine he wants us to reflect mostly on the difference in pitch. The products even have different title casing, interestingly.
In particular, he also asked which one is better in terms of I actually get what the thing is.
I mean, I've noted my answer in my head. Rishi, what's your answer?
My answer would be number one.
That's interesting. Okay, great. My answer would be number two then. Tell me then about number one.
Wow, funny. We already split. Maybe it's because I don't actually know if the thing that I want to do, like neither actually tells me exactly what it is, but number one makes me want to click and find out. So I didn't really answer his question. I actually really like get 26 hours every day. I'm curious if you think maybe that's maybe it's I don't know what the word is, cheesy, but I actually kind of like it.
Yeah, it's interesting that that things to you. For me, I guess the following things are going on. First of all, I should say one, I'm a sucker for dark home pages. Two, I'm a sucker for the casing on TimeOS, lowercase t. TimeOS is macOS style casing. But those are asides. You know, here, although this is lowercase, you can see up here it's uppercase. Anyway, 26 hours a day. There's a couple of things that are confusing there to me. There's 24 hours in a day, and so I don't know why you've added two as opposed to one. So that's more confusing than revealing to me. Second, I feel like there's a lot of different ways to get 26 hours in a day, and one thing we talk a lot about here is how much you want to be aspirational versus transactional, but it just doesn't tell me that this is a calendar app. And the thing below the fold, that this image is not immediately a calendar image. So it's not
Maybe
anyway.
the problem that I'm experiencing here actually is because we've seen it so many times. I had a little bit of a cheat code.
That is maybe the familiarity effect. Whereas here, in homepage number two, current calendars, I at least now know it's a calendar. Now, I still don't think this is a great page because I actually think this is probably what's beneath the fold, as you'd say something like this. This would not be your like opening masthead in an ideal world, but it at least tells me that it's a calendar. I would still change this text. Also, this page is shorter, which is better in my opinion. But to your point, I do think homepage number, so in my view, just summarizing, homepage number two does a better job communicating what the product is. Homepage number one does a better job communicating how the products are different from all the other calendars. So on the margin, I would personally pick one. I mean, it's interesting. You have here a split audience, and so that's great news. I mean, I feel like when you get feedback, you're asking interesting questions. Go ahead.
The one thing that I think maybe the way that I'd split it is the problem with number 2, in my view, is that there's a lot of words, and once I read the words, that I kind of get it, but most people aren't going to read all those words.
Mm-hmm.
And so maybe the concept of 2, which is just be much clearer and direct about what the thing is, but in picture form for those of us, which is the majority of us that don't really want to read everything. So take that content, but sort of change the style to option 1 might be the winning combination.
Insofar as much as you want to have, you must have an aspirational message. Even something like that is a bit better for me. But I would still prefer, I mean, just this is my 2 cents. I mean, maybe it's just I see so many homepages. I would just prefer, something like, TimeOS, or if you don't have to repeat it. Something like that would really speak. Okay, good stuff. So kind of bit of both. Hopefully this is directionally helpful. I do think, by the way, maybe this is useful for everyone else here, as Roman looks ahead and tries to figure out what to do with this split feedback that we gave him. The wrong thing to do is, I think, try to do heat map analysis and use all sorts of analytic tools to see what's good. The right thing to do is to just do the process that we just did here with another 10 or 12 people and get them to narrate their feelings as they go through the homepage. I don't think you have to scale that much. Okay, next up we have Kaider. Criminal's friend. It's a job. It's an ATS for applicants, not for companies.
So just before you dive into landing page feedback, since we've done this one before, Peter actually has a specific question. So I know I misled you with the landing page feedback intro before. He has the classic experience of a lot of my users said they'd be willing to pay, and so I added payments and they're not paying.
Yes.
The conversion has just been much worse than he anticipated. So should he extend the free trial period? Should he go back should you remove payment plans for now, or continue working on conversion?
Well, this brings us to an interesting topic, which is revealed preferences and stated preferences. Obviously, there are differences between both, and look at this interesting Wikipedia page with some nice numbers and figures to really tell you nothing about it. But TLDR, asking people how much they pay, willingness surveys, I don't think correlate to credit card form. I think the safest thing one could do, there's 2 paths to success here. One is to, try and get people to pay, because at the end of the day, if you are able to get people to pay up front, you'll at least know that you'll have something valuable. You won't have to rely on a survey and so forth. The other strategy is a kind of Figma approach, which is, you kind of keep on extending the free trial over and over and over, like a good old copy of WinRAR. If you use that back in 2005, it's the free trial never really ends. And then you try and build goodness, into your product and hope that people convert over time. This addendum works particularly well if you plan on having a very viral product. So, Figma, it works really well for Figma because it can spread within a company that way, and then, they can suddenly charge people. Zoom is somewhat similar. It's not clear to me immediately that Kaider is that. And so on the margin, I would actually try and hold fairly firm ground, trying to get people to pay for this before endlessly giving it away for free, because I do worry that Kaider can become something that is, an incredibly awesome, nice to have tool, but not kind of a must have. And, the way to separate those two is pricing. So on the margin, I would try and work on conversion as opposed to just endlessly extending free trials. There's one small addendum to this, which is like if you're trying to literally get 50 people to use your thing just so that you can talk to users and get energy from them and get feedback from them, it's probably fine to give it away for free. It just, you know, insofar as much as you do things that don't scale, that strategy doesn't scale at all. So, you know, sooner rather than later, you would want to start charging people. And the nice thing, by the way, about holding a firm ground there is it might be so painful to do / impossible that it causes you to change your revenue model, which is a great thing. You discover great things, and maybe you end up charging companies, maybe you end up trying something totally different because you learn. You'll never learn if you give it away for free, I think. Rishi, what do you think?
Yeah, I wonder if one thing that Peter might say is, well, I see all these companies that stay free for a much longer time than you're talking about right now. They'll stay free until for years, literally, before they start forcing users to pay. So how do I know that that's not the right approach here?
Yeah, I mean, it's very case dependent. In the game of venture is, you know, on the one hand, founders kind of doing their own thing, and on the other hand, incubators, accelerators, and investors trying to build, you know, common frameworks and rules that apply across different companies into a fundamentally is a chaotic process. But all of that being said, you know, I think in this particular case, like, it's really possible that without the stressor of forcing people to pay, you end up convincing yourself that, you know, you have a really useful product when at the end of the day, it's still nice to have. You know, a demarcation point in my mind when it's okay to give something away for free is, you know, again, one, when you're trying to spread virally in an enterprise, or maybe two, where you have very clear, how would you say, price
Network effects?
discrimination. Sorry?
Oh, we were going to go totally different directions. Never mind.
Price discrimination points where, you know, like Zoom is free for, I think, 45-minute meetings and not for an hour. So I think like that works really well. Anyone doing a 45-minute meeting is going to do an hour. So I just can't, I mean, but like in my head, I guess having seen a bunch of startups now, this to me just pattern matches to something that could be replaced by a spreadsheet. And so I think having, and by the way, I mean, so could like UiPath and Retool. So, you know, that's not a total knock on companies, but on the margin, like you may want to keep the stressor of the gravity, almost the gravitational energy of the pricing page so that you build the correct muscle, you know, instead of just endlessly giving it for free. The final thing to say is like, if sometimes I don't believe in this, you give it away and give something away forever. Some type of like, you know, the data set will take us there and we just need to aggregate the data. But this, Rishi, before I interrupted you, what were you going to say?
I was going to say something totally unhelpful, which is I hope David is not listening. David from Retool.
Oh, I really hope he's not listening too, because he should have better things to do than anyway.
This next one is a big upgrade from when we first saw Kumar's. It was a different project. It was same project, different name, totally different landing page. It's a big upgrade, and so two questions from him. One is just a general landing page feedback, followed by a question on pricing strategy to connect the last one, but we'll get to that second question in a moment.
Okay, great. So here we have a landing page for Beam. It's Beam. Get paid to delight your followers via text. Invest in Krispy Kreme stock, I think is what that said. Beat them, a donut recipe. Beat them, beam them, a stock tip. Okay, cool. Yeah, I mean, I think we've spoken about similar concepts in the past. There is an intimacy in getting a text message from someone, and I guess the idea here is to leverage that form of intimacy with a celebrity, and so, you know, send text to your fans seems cool. Overall homepage feedback for me, I mean, I guess broad and then specific. I mean, look, it's cool upgrade. It's interactive. It's cool. It makes you want to scroll. Some specific things. I think the word delight was super in vogue, you know, maybe 4 or 5, 6 years ago, and is not that I think much in the zeitgeist now. I would just try and think of a different verb, maybe. It's just not that commonly used. The examples here are maybe it's a different audience, but it's just a bit all over the place, in my opinion. The rendering on the 3D hands is somewhat off-putting. It's in uncanny valley territory. So I wonder if there's like a way to make it almost seem more cartoonish or more human. Just not we're in the in-between. But I mean, overall, it seems good. I mean, I'd say that look, the landing page has personality. It's kind of cute, which is neat. You don't see that often. You just mostly see people trying to mimic Stripe's landing page. So it's good to see something unique. What do you think, Rishi? How does this strike you? Looks like a cake.
Yeah, the main question, I mean, it's an interesting point on sort of the style and how it is quite unique. The main question for me is if it fit. I guess I just don't, like, we know this is going to become a thing at some point, but presumably for the team, they have to figure out who are going to be the first people to use them. And I just wonder, it could be the right answer though. What they have is great, but it probably comes hand in hand with figuring out who their first two users are going to be and whether they're, how big they are.
Yes.
Like, I just don't have a clear sense of who, Is it going to be like, are their first users going to be celebrities? Or how are they going to get those celebrities? And is this landing page the right one for them?
It is true. Yeah. This landing page speaks to like, we expect our first users to be, I don't know, teenager celebrities. It's not, we expect our first few great users to be like music artists. Because this is not an aesthetic for music artists. So maybe that's the right way to think about the landing page.
Their other question, Kumar's other question is, he has two pricing models that he could be picking from, and the one he's sticking with right now is the Substack one. So it's he's charging 20% on all transactions. Substack does 10%, so 20% on subscriptions, on tips. The other option is to have it be sort of usage tiered. For example, if you are a creator that is sending X number of texts per month, or you have some sort of set of packages and tiers, and you price them accordingly. So he's wondering if he should copy Substack in that sense, or try something different.
I don't know. This is the type of question that you only know after talking to 100 users. So it's too domain specific for me. I do think it's pretty funny how these companies like Substack, I was looking up the other day just the amount of times in books and such people have mentioned the term red pill, and it basically is the Matrix's cultural gift to the world, where like right after, I don't know what it is, 1999, everyone starts mentioning it and no one mentioned it before. And I think the companies have similar effects with their pricing patterns, where Substack is like now the thing everyone's talking about, their pricing terms. They're just kind of get forking them. Just like, people get forked like terms from the Matrix or the term Inception being driven by the film Inception. So I don't know, there's more of an abstract aside because I don't have specific feedback here. I think you should just talk to users and ask them. It's quite possible that it's easy. Like the pro would be just Substack's pricing, which has been around for a while, but it's now been brought into vogue and people understand it. The other thing is Substack's a very particular business, so what works for them may not work for you. But I would just talk to users and ask them. Sorry for not having something more specific here. It's just really difficult for me to understand what would be both more attractive to an influencer and to understand, how much money would be on either pocket.
Sounds great. Let's get to the next one. This is an interesting one. Shane from the UK is asking, so in particular with the landing page, is it clear what problem they're solving? That's number one. I think the answer to that is clear to me. Number two is an interesting one, which is it clear that there's value to companies in offering localized pricing?
Right. And I think the answer is obviously yes. I mean, I actually think there's a variant of this where there are companies that exist, which is localized salary. Um,
Hmm.
uh, there definitely are data sets for, I don't know if they're proper companies. I remember at Apple, small aside, I mean, this is so old, I can't imagine. I mean, I know it's fairly public, but you know, there's this issue when the ruble was crashing. It actually became we stopped, I think we stopped selling iPhones in Russia because we couldn't figure out what the price of an iPhone in Russia should be. And people started using that as a commodity arbitrage. So you end up with these funny scenarios where Forex affects pricing in kind of various different ways. Obviously, buying power, you know, changes across countries too, to the extent that you wanted to adjust for that. So I think that's interesting. What I think this company might struggle with is integration. So there are two separable things, you know, in your Gartner 2x2 that make for a good enterprise sale. You know, vitamin versus painkiller, and how would you say tightly versus loosely integrated. And obviously, the best things are painkillers that are loosely integrated. This is fairly tightly integrated, and maybe a painkiller. So that's a bit tough. That's not your sweet spot Gartner quadrant. It's not your loser quadrant, but it's not your winner. Um, so that would be my question, you know, is if you're like, let's imagine you're selling, the simplest example is your Notion or something, and you're trying to figure out how much you should price in the Philippines. Um, I don't know, you may just, if things are going really well, you're not going to change your price globally. And if things are at the point where you're going to optimize your price, I just don't know you're going to use an outside service for this, which is do it in-house with you know, a couple of hours as an analyst. One interesting question would be if we had to do this like a full-time job, one thing I would do is think about this a little bit less as localized pricing, a little bit more as lost revenue with breakage. Um, Meaning, to the extent that you wanted to offer opaque pricing on your product that does change based on just who you are, uh, you can probably gross more revenue at the cost of, you know, potential users being frustrated because of the optics of it. But airlines do this, and Uber does this, and Instacart does this. So doing opaque pricing for SaaS, I think, could be an interesting idea. You'd have to somehow start sending cold emails to people like Notion saying, "Hey, I adjust, you know, the cost of your transparent pricing on your website, I can prove to you is, I don't know, what, $10 million of lost revenue. Because I've run A/B tests with lookalike Notion websites, and I change the price based on the person's zip code, and I'm able to capture revenue you're losing. So, are you interested in having opaque pricing? You'd have to somehow prove the value up front, though. So that'd be maybe one variant of that I'd consider. Um, that's a bit more global than, you know, like per country. Meaning even the
Are there
US.
cases in which you think, so you named a few examples, of course, but can you, is it possible to come up with sort of a generalization for when it makes sense or when companies can pull off opaque pricing? Because it's obviously not the norm. Like, why fundamentally can Uber get away with it? Oops, we appear to have lost Daniel. Thought the question was tough. I was wondering why he was pausing for that long.
Hi, did we lose
I
me
thought,
there?
oh, yeah, we did lose you. And for a moment, I was like, wow, that was clearly a very tough question.
Yes, really blew my brain. No, I mean, business class subsidizes economy, right? So, um, this stuff does happen. Why can Uber, why does it work in flights and it does not work with SaaS? Um, you know, one interesting distinction I imagine is the the skew, like the price of an Uber trip changes every trip. So you can't really compare that with your friends. Whereas the price of SaaS is monthly. So you could like very clearly just ask at some point, are you getting charged $4 a month or 12? It's just things are more confusing with flights and with Uber because of dynamic pricing all around, even if you don't discriminate. So you could kind of argue they never had clear pricing, meaning the airline was never charging you per minute in plane.
Oh, the other difference, which I think is yeah quite similar, is that in those cases you're making one-off purchases,
Yes.
and it's harder to just give a SaaS company my credit card and say, yeah, you'll bill this appropriately infinitely, as opposed to for a single purchase where I can at least make the decision of, am I okay with this price or not?
That is definitely true. Although I do think if you said that was the constraint, obviously underwriting would become even trickier, but you could probably say, we'll lock in the price. And then you're going to have all sorts of people like VPN through India to get the low price,
Yeah. Yeah.
But Amazon does, to your point about it not being recurring, Amazon, I mean, I think used to, maybe still does. So there is a PR, look, it's like a cost. There's a cost associated with this because people want fairness, and this is not fair. I need to reshare my screen because the internet. Stream. It's somewhat similar. Pricing and asset stabilization software for commercial real estate. Proven techniques from econometrics, spatial economics, and data science to turn real estate data into decisions.
I'm also linking you to a demo if you want to click through that quite quickly after looking at the landing page.
Yeah, I see it. But these YouTube short links are getting more complicated every day.
I don't know why they added the hyphen as an acceptable character in the regex.
I mean, I assume they just ran out. IP space. Wow, we're getting being recommended our own stream. Okay, interesting.
There's sort of a two-part question here, which is number one is sort of the question on navigating the sales cycle for this sort of customer for commercial real estate. The other, obviously quite related, is the landing page, and how much maybe even does the landing page matter at this stage, and who should he be building for if he's trying to think about that sales cycle?
Interestingly, I feel like we know of a lot of companies that try and do automatic real estate pricing. So I would kind of wonder how this guy is different from everyone else doing dynamic pricing. But anyway, your question was different. A more interesting one. Does the
I think your question will get baked in there.
Yeah. You're like the Oracle from the Matrix. You have all the answers already, and you're just slowly watching this play out. All the world is. Look, I mean, landing pages serve two different things. I think probably many, but we can think of broadly two different applications. One is like getting people to sign up and pay you. What would we call that? We could consider that, full-grown landing pages. And then there are the second category, which is landing pages as a kind of shingle, a storefront. And it's the same reason Harney and Sons calls itself Harney and Sons when it sells you tea. It sounds like an old esteemed business, and so that's why they picked that name. Even though I imagine in reality it's manufactured, you know, in somewhere in rural United States. So the landing page can serve as a way of like underwriting your authenticity and how real you are after you go and do that sale. No one's going to sign up on your landing page, but after or during the call, they'll probably go and check out your landing page. To the extent that you're in that latter category, which I think Stream would tell you it is. I mean, I can't give them my credit card here. I think this is getting a B out of PBC in terms of score. Like, it's fine, but it could be much more exciting. A couple of quick things I would say quickly. I'm sure you can layer on more. First of all, believe it or not, we're in 2021, but also, I mean, this looks fairly templated. I actually don't think .app is the right domain if you're going to sell to enterprise. I think if you're like selling to hackers, it's great. That's why I think it's probably fine for Pioneer. But if you're selling to like deep enterprise, I would even get streamapp.com. I know that sounds small, but I think the stuff kind of matters. And you have the iconography doesn't properly line up. Like these are going to be your two icons. They need to be centered, and it's all this like kitchen sink kind of stuff that ends up mattering at the end of the day, because you basically need your landing page to reduce your CAC by looking the part. And this kind of reveals to people that you're wearing sweatpants, which is fine. Everyone is, but you need to look the part. What do you think, Rishi?
Yeah, I have other thoughts, but I'll actually kind of pivot to what I think is the other important question, which is in this process of trying to acquire customers, I guess what is the right way for him to navigate that sales cycle? Should he start with, here's a link to my landing page and an email? Should he try to be getting on a call? What is the right way to do that?
I think if you are going to have a landing page, it's not that hard to invest in and make it look super professional. It's like one of the great things I think of the web is that people, regardless of their, the way they look, the country they're in, born from, or age, they can make a really professional sounding business. It'd be much harder to do that in the brick and mortar world. So I do think you send a cold email, send 1,000 cold emails a day to people and try to have a landing page that really suits your audience. I mean, we think a lot about that at Pioneer. It's obviously different audiences, a bit more of the outsider type. And so I think what we do kind of makes sense for us. But I think if you're selling to commercial real estate folks, you need to, I don't know what's like a good CRE website, but you need to look the part,
Yep.
To be fair, it's not that hard. I mean, this isn't like a Stripe quality landing page. So the competition, I get that LoopNet's not exactly the competition, but it's not that different. But like your goal should be the person who comes to our site and feels like we're a serious thing. And I think this is, 70% of the way there. Not 0, not 100. By the way, one final thing. I mean, if you wanted to overachieve, it'd be awesome if it looked. I mean, I think what's trying. I mean, obviously, you're trying to convey this in words. This concept of like dynamic pricing and real estate owners, just like the stock market. If you could get a landing page that actually feels like a live heartbeat Bloomberg style terminal, that'd be really cool. And that might be just $5,000 you have to spend making that. I mean, it's just static data, but I think that'd be really cool. All right.
I'm linking you to a different one. One sec.
Oh, I see. Yep.
You got it.
There we go.
So our good friend Pioneer Daniel Getman is running into this. Has an interesting situation where his click-through rate on his Facebook ads is quite high, 11%.
Okay.
Ordering at all.
Yes. Okay, so I mean, there are thousands of tools and blog posts and words online about optimizing landing pages. You know, maybe what we could do is just as people arriving at this with relatively little exposure to the particular page, give some feedback. But Daniel, I think you're going to have to go through this process with people over and over and over again. You know, maybe on Zoom or whatnot. Like you might want to buy traffic to asking people to record a Loom video reacting to this landing page. That would be, and I'll give you that feedback in a second. The other thing that I would quickly do if I were you is just go to landing pages of your competitors and learn from them in abstract. So the introduction of review concept, I think, makes sense. A lot of people do that on these CPG sites, you know, to provide for some sense of social affirmation. But this looks like pretty fake to me. You know, there's at least some type of page with, I don't know, real or just whatnot, testimonials or not.
Yeah, that there are reviews. If you click through to buy trial, there are actually reviews. So that should probably just link.
Yeah, I would probably just link there.
So one immediate thing that stands out to me, buy trial is unusual phrasing.
Yes.
It strikes me as you're trying to make me feel like it's low commitment, but you still have to pay for it.
It definitely feels like there's something clever I need to think about. Like, you know, is this going to be some type of Herbalife situation? Is what comes to mind for me. You know, impossible to cancel, recurring. We're going to just send me this package every month. So yeah, you know, that would be the other simple thing that I think a lot of folks have realized is just like changing one word on the button moves miles. But I guess the other thing I struggle with is just, again, observing this in kind of a hypoxic mind, bit of a, you know, user just browsing the web, trying not to think too hard. I don't really know what it is. There's no photo of it. And I guess it's this thing, but there's blueberries here and raspberries here and lemons here and packet. And it doesn't really look like a packet. It kind of, I don't know. It's just like, what is this guy up to? Now, maybe people who come here already know what it is. Like, I think the most popular keto CPG at Whole Foods now, but like, at least it's kind of interesting. The product is not here either. You see butter and almonds and flour.
They have the advantage of the name.
Yes.
The name actually you kind of know immediately.
I mean, that would be something to consider too. He has a lot of look at this, I mean, with the reviews, but also he puts in all of these icons. I mean, obviously, Daniel will get there at some point, but I think that could be something interesting. And I guess, by the way, he may not show you what it is here, but as you scroll it, you do see it, which matters a lot, I think, to me at least. I now know it's like a packaged cookie, at least, if not more. So, food for thought.
The meta suggestion for Daniel, by the way, might be that, I mean, if he has such great success on the ads, don't mess with the ads, just mess on what they go to. Try a bunch of different landing pages, mess with the words, and see if one of them converts far better.
Yes. All right, good stuff. A lot going on in the CPG world. Incognito for Slack.com. Learn how your team really feels.
So right now, Matt has 6 paying customers, and he says they're quite engaged, giving him great product suggestions, going really well, new trials coming in. And how should he think about scaling from or growing from 10 customers to 100? Should he kind of go one by one? Are there particular channels he should be thinking about? Yeah, any suggestions you have in mind?
Yeah. Honestly, Matt, kind of doing exactly what I'm doing with you now, which is talking with them individually. Okay, awesome. But I think I think that kind of grinding works at this level of scale. By the way, just your pricing page, you should have more. You should have just 3 options. It actually, I think, makes things simpler, just because every pricing page has at least 3 options, or at least 2. Pricing pages with 1 option are such a rarity that I think they cause more, like, how would you say, cognitive dissonance than 3 options. I would just talk to your existing users and try to understand who they are and try to understand what gets them excited about your product, and then do a lookalike modeling to finding other people like that. Do not really, I wouldn't ask them, like, when I say who they are, I'd ask them kind of like about the properties of what makes them who they are, meaning how many people are at their company, what types of problems are they solving, what's their workflow like, and then reverse map those properties maybe to other adjacent people, and also ask them for referrals. I think that stuff kind of works. The marketplace of Slack products is large, and so, like, I don't think the Slack app store is really going to help you. There's just too many things, too many similar things, and Slack really hasn't solved discovery for their own app store, so I think you're going to have to go and sell it yourself. What would we do with this particular thing? I mean, I don't know. I think there's an interesting adjacent product. I'm blanking on the name for it, but there is that anonymous social network for companies. Blind?
Blind?
Anyway, my personal opinion is,
yeah, blind.
Anonymous social networks, unless the objective function of the social network is humor, as is with Reddit, devolve into very bad things. But there is a thing that Blind does solve for, which is positive, which is, just getting, how would you say, just quantitative numerical data on people, on how they're feeling. And so you could take the case that anonymous social networks are probably great if you constrain the input to maybe just voting on things. And this, I think, you could potentially sell to employers, which is basically, you could be the sinkhole to take pressure away from Blind. If you build a Blind competitor that doesn't let people randomly gossip, which is usually what happens on these products, but just answer polling data. And maybe you don't let every Joe, like, issue their own poll, because otherwise, again, it turns into gossip. That could be pretty interesting. Sends is for your company. I don't know that it needs to be in Slack, by the way. I, as a potential employee at a company, wouldn't really trust. Slack is a very identifiable environment. So I'd kind of want a different UI and a different mix for that. I think that could sell. I mean, I think anyone who runs a large company is very afraid of Blind, just because, like, you can't really control it, and people can spread rumors. I mean, there's a reason why we remember people's faces so well. It's because, like, identity really matters for positive social communication. That's my personal belief. But anonymous census data, I think, would be quite interesting. So it's just an adjacent way, an adjacent product line. I don't know. Rishi, what do you think?
It's interesting. The point about certain companies, perhaps larger ones, actually being fearful of this, and so maybe they'll be less likely to have it. Maybe the fact that it has to be on their internal Slack versus on some external platform makes it easier to get adoption. Isn't it? I wouldn't have thought of that. I wonder if Like, should he be worried about that, or is that the scale of company that is so large anyway? It's going to be that's sort of a distant problem.
I mean, you find that very quickly here.
And that's kind of my sense, is that, I mean, it could be wrong, but I imagine I imagine he hasn't yet gotten the feedback from early founders. It also is probably harder to get. Actually, how does pricing work for blind? Obviously, if you Google blind pricing, that gives you window blinds.
I do think they have some high-end extortion model. All these companies do. Gluster does too.
Anyway, yeah, my take
Yeah.
would be, I'm assuming at least because it helps most with the pricing strategy, it is easiest to do this with customers who simply just want this and aren't scared for their employees about this type of thing
Yes.
happening. Down to our final two. Alicia in Oklahoma would like general landing page feedback and is wondering, what problem do you think this is solving?
Find your dreams anywhere. A visual search engine for formal work. You know, this idea keeps on coming back to people, which means it's going to happen. It's just no one's figured out the format. I don't know how. Okay, maybe we get to this in product feedback in a second. Landing page feedback. I mean, it looks decent. This to my brain speaks like standard iPhone app landing page without a link to App Store. What do you think, Rishi?
Yeah, I think it's at that stage of landing page that we see somewhat regularly, which is maybe, I'm guessing it's just not on the App Store yet. So that's why there's no link. We'll get there eventually.
You go down that rabbit hole of like, what's the better thing than email for reminding me the apps on the App Store, but that's a whole other can of worms. I mean, everyone has tried this so many times, including the native platforms themselves. You would have thought this would have been like a solved problem on by Pinterest, by Instagram. It's interesting, it's not totally solved. I think a lot of what these types of apps in general have struggled with is, if you're not a platform like Instagram, building the recall habit for someone to screenshot what they're currently seeing, open it in this app, and then find it is hard. And it's hard because you're going to have 70% or 60% or 80% success, not 99% success. And when you have machine learning products that have an error rate of say above 10%, it's really hard for the customer to build habitual faith and belief in the system, so they don't end up using it repeatedly.
That's a surprising threshold. In other words, I would have expected more patience from the user.
I remember, at least for Apple with Siri, you had to get word error rate in English sub 5%, and it was binary. Like, not quite binary, but it was like there was this order of magnitude jump in engagement when you got below 5% with word error. Yeah, so that's what's tough. And so, of course, the solution for this is not to build super ML models or build work on AGI. The solution is to build interfaces that support more failure. The godfather of all these interfaces is the search box itself, meaning it's a tool, the customer understands somewhat how it works, and so they can refine it. They can refine with the tool until they get to the query that they want, and so they build habitual use. And of course, the giant kicker with search is they help train your models as a result of their refinements. So I think with a lot of AI products, anyway, that's the question to do. I don't know how to do that if you're not a platform, with the case of image search. So search inside image, sorry, that is. So like if you really had to do this, maybe it would be some type of like new DuckDuckGo for images in general. And then as a kicker, you got really good at, form aware visual engine search. Anyway, I think that's my worry slash ponderance. That's a word for this company. Okay, here's another way of doing this. Suppose you were like, I don't give a crap about what you said. I really like form aware and I want just to stare at it all day and also have that be my company. Maybe you build just like a new magazine app. And the magazine app, it's like magazines for World 2.0. And we scrape all the dresses that are hot on Instagram and hot on Twitter and hot on TikTok and just show them to you in a magazine. Maybe that's it. It's not a search engine. I think that could be interesting. That way, there's always a guarantee that there's something fresh. Food for thought. It'll be kind of fun, actually.
We should move on to the last project for today.
Okay.
Actually, potentially, if we have time, we can sneak in some unscheduled demos, or a unscheduled demo of, I think you can guess what.
Yes. Engineering blogs. A search engine for engineering blogs.
I'll just start by saying I actually quite enjoyed just entering. So Pioneer is built on Rails, so I just searched Rails, and it's been quite fun just poking around and seeing a lot of these that actually seem, but it's fun to read how large successful companies have done interesting things with the language to make it work. Oh, that's.
Someone should expand their search engine.
Oh, you know what? I have an email from him that says right now it only indexes 6 company blogs. Mozilla, yes. Firefox. Okay.
By the way, it's very fine. When I started my prior company as a search engine and a search engine for personal information and the Spotlight search basically. And when I did my first demo at YC Demo Day, I was like, yeah, small caveat about the service. It only serves my data right now. Because there's other people too. But that's in theory. So yeah, so all of that's totally fine. Yeah, I guess our question here was what? Would you bookmark the site, Rishi?
I actually, there's something here that I would bookmark. I'm trying to figure out what it is. I don't know if it's this exact implementation. I'll tell you the problem that I run into quite often as a startup, which is figuring out how successful companies have solved particular problems. And so one thing I do, for example, is I actually go to large Rails repositories every now and then to see how they solve a particular problem. GitLab is an example, large company, open source entirely, so it makes it really easy for me to see how they solved that problem. This in its current form, I wouldn't, because it's not clear to me that this is just any better than Google. But there is something here, I think, that solves the problem that I face somewhat regularly.
Yeah, I mean, one thing this person could consider doing that I think would help a little bit is, I don't know, an interim. I think there's all sorts of interesting ways. Google obviously sucks now, and so it's exciting to think about better Google. I do a lot of query kind of extension, and so I think if you did kind of query reformulation and reformatted Google results, that could help you build sticky user base. Like, if I put in CUDA and then some query modifiers, automatically things get just much more interesting for me. And so maybe you just do a search engine that just does that behind the scenes. And at some point, Google sends you a cease and desist, but whatever. So, like, you could probably search all the websites you're indexing now for Google. Food for thought. All right, Rishi, on to you for a demo. Oh, we don't have your audio, or is it me?
Oops, yeah, I know that was me. Yeah, a little bit of unscheduled programming here. We, a couple months ago, we launched this thing called Launcher, which you may or may not have seen. I'm pulling it up right now. The idea was it was software to walk you through the process of launching a product. And we are actually now about to make that course one of a series of courses, and the second one being Find Product Market Fit. You could try going to this URL, but it won't work. Sorry, at least not yet. The idea for this next course is to productize the process of finding product market fit, and we'll kind of take you through a series of steps based on that. The PMF engine that was popularized by Rahul Vohra and Superhuman is actually started by Sean Ellis almost a decade ago. I think it has just now gained quite a bit of popularity. And so it'll take you through the process of creating a survey, emailing your users, actually measuring product market fit, and kind of taking through the process of figuring out how to get closer to that coveted 40% number, 40% of your users thinking your product is a must-have. So stay tuned for this. We'll launch it, seems like early next week, Monday or Tuesday. And send us feedback when you do.
Super duper. I enjoyed that. I thought that landing page was great. Thank you again, Rishi. I guess we'll be back here soon for another one of these.
Yeah, we'll start doing these. We're going to be doing these once a month, kind of indefinitely.